We are in Bellingham, Massachusetts, and it's Friday, December 5th, 2014, and this tape is part of the Bellingham Mendon Veterans Oral History Project. My name is Marjorie Turner Holman. Our cameraman is Jeff Paul of ABMI Cable 8 TV. We are privileged to have with us today Robert Weidman of Franklin, Massachusetts. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, Robert, would you tell us your whole name, please? Your first, middle, and last name.
It is Bob Weidman, in Franklin, Mass.
Okay. And could you explain your connection to Bellingham with us, please?
Well, my daughter lives in Bellingham, and 2 grandchildren live in Bellingham.
All right.
And she suggested doing this.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Now, I think you have some members of your family who served in the military. Could you tell us about them?
Yes, I had one brother that was in the Marines for 11 years.
I think this is a picture of you with your brother
It's,
right there. Is that
that
right?
is another brother that was in Korea at the same time I was, that we got to see each other 4 or 5 times while I was over there.
Okay.
And the brother in the Marines, that one was the Army. And there was one more that was in Korea, and he was also in the Army.
And we have a picture of you and one of your brothers with your mother there.
That is, yeah, that would be my mother and my brother that was in the Marines. He was
Okay.
in for 13 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then that's a picture of you with your father.
That would be my father, yes.
All right. Now, were any further generations back in the military at all?
No, just my father was in the Navy, but
He was.
years ago. Yes.
Okay. All right. And could you tell us, married, children?
We have 4 boys and 2 girls.
Okay. And talk to us a little about what you were doing before you were in the service.
Actually, I was in high school. And I decided at one point that I didn't want to go to school that day, so me and another fellow went to join the Marines. And he was old enough and I wasn't, so he had to end up going in the Marines, and I had to wait 3 months to join, so I ended up going in the Army.
And this was all because you didn't want to go to school one day?
Well, we had nothing else to do that day, so we figured we'd go join the service. So. But he couldn't get out of it, so he had to go.
So you had to keep staying in school for 3 more months
Yes.
until you were 18 or
17.
17?
I went in at 17 and 3 days.
So that means you didn't complete high school?
No, I didn't. I
Okay.
got the GED at the end while I was
Okay.
in the service. So.
Okay. And why the Army?
Just because it was easier to go there by bus to join than it was to go all the way to Providence. I ended up going to Framingham, so
Is that right?
no special reason.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Now, you already told us how old you were, that you were just 17.
Right.
Okay. And tell us about going to boot camp.
Well, that was an experience because almost everybody that was there when I was in, we went to Pennsylvania, Indiantown Gap in Pennsylvania, just outside of Harrisburg. And almost everybody was roughly 4 years older than me because most of them were draftees. So they were all older. And it was exciting because there was stuff that anybody at 17 would like to do, handling the guns. So, and you got to try everything that was there. So.
What about the rigors of boot camp? How was
well,
that for you?
It wasn't easy. If you didn't do a lot of exercise before you went in, it wasn't the easiest thing to do. So it was 16 weeks of training. So.
How fit were you? Had you done a lot of exercise?
No.
So it was hard.
So it was pretty hard, yeah. Yeah, especially because a lot of it was in the colder weather. I went in September, and by the time we got to the middle of it, we were into November and December, and it got pretty cold in Pennsylvania in the mountains.
Okay. Now, Once you were finished with boot camp, what then?
Well,
And
at that point, it was like the first week of January. We went by train. It took almost 7 days to go by train to Seattle, Washington. And when we got there, we were there for roughly a week, and then we went by boat, headed for a boat for Japan.
I think we have a picture of the boat that you rode.
Yes, that would be the Marine Phoenix. It was, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 troops on it.
Wow.
And we got most of the way there, and then it broke down. And they towed us to Hawaii, to Pearl Harbor. We were there 3 days, and we had to wait for another boat to come in that already had some on it. And we had to get on that boat.
Oh, gosh.
And we ended up going to Japan from there, Yokohama.
What year, what time frame are we talking about?
That would have been 1954, January 1954.
Okay. All right. And we've got a picture here in Japan. I believe that was...
That would be in Hiroshima, and it was all bombed out from the atomic bomb. And probably a year after I was in Korea, we went there for 7 days. They're like R&R in 7 days in Korea. We went to Japan.
Remind me the year. That would have been, did you say?
That would have been in 54.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it was less than 10
that was like
years.
around July or August of 1954.
Okay, now you didn't take that picture. How did you get that picture?
Oh, there were people along the side of the street that were all scarred up from being there when the bomb was dropped, and they were selling postcards.
So
That's how they made their
survivors.
living, I assume.
Okay,
Yeah.
so these were survivors of the atomic bomb.
Right.
Tell us how that felt.
Well, it's kind of rough seeing some of those people because I'm sure they didn't have all plastic surgeons and all that stuff like you have, around here. But and they were, like I say, they were all scarred up, and that's the only way they could make any money.
Wow.
They didn't really have jobs, so
Okay.
I can't even remember. It was probably like 25 cents to buy a postcard.
Sure.
So,
But you chose to support them.
yeah, me and almost everybody that went there on R&R, that's what they would do, is buy those cards and send them home. So.
Okay. And when you first got over to, you did some training before you went to Korea. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, in Japan, they took a large group of us. I think the way it looked like, it was like near the middle of the alphabet to the end, and we stayed there. The rest of the guys that were on the boat went right to Korea, and we stayed in Japan for combat medic training.
That's how they turned you into a combat medic, was because
That's
you
what
were
they
in the
trained us for.
Your family was a W.
Yep. So when we went over there, from there, that was probably 3 weeks training.
Okay.
And then from there, then we would afterwards we would end up going to Korea in different units.
As medics.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. And the Korean War was actively being fought.
That was still on, because that didn't get over till the midsummer of that year.
Oh, okay.
So, and this
All
would
right.
have been first part of March.
Of
Beginning of March.
54?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And tell us about how long you were in Korea.
16 months, just probably 2 or 3 days short of 16 months.
Okay. All right. And can you talk to us about what you did
In Korea?
in Korea?
Well, we were in a MASH unit with the medics, and we were like where the 38th parallel was, which was probably a mile, maybe 2 miles behind where the action was. And our job was, after the troops would get wounded, they would take them back to us with a helicopter or ambulance, and they would stay with us for a few days and maybe change the bandages or whatever and make them comfortable. And then they would go from us further south down to where the hospital was. And a lot of times they would take them on these rail buses. It was something that could go either on the railroad tracks, or if it was bombed out, they could go around that part on the wheels and then get back on the track and go further south.
And this would get them farther away from the
Right, further away
the
from
front
the
lines.
fighting at that point, yeah.
What were the sounds like? You said you were a mile from the front lines.
Well, we could hear the guns and stuff going off too, as far as the artillery, and see the flashes and stuff. But there was nothing right where we were. But
I'm guessing that the threat was always there.
it was, because you wouldn't know if whoever was in front of you got overrun, then they would come back to where we were. So.
Does that mean that you had to be prepared to move your MASH unit, meaning a mobile unit that you could move operations?
Right. We only had probably maybe 5 or 6 tents, and they were all tents. Nothing was permanent. Everything was by tents.
We have a picture of the tents when I think they were below. Yes.
Yes, that was one day when it was very windy and the whole tent blew down.
Oh dear.
So we had to have some of the help that we had that worked with us, the Koreans, South Koreans, and they had to help put it up.
So this was like the hospital, all the tents just blew down?
Right. Well, that tent happened to be the one that we lived in. But the hospital tents were just like that. They were the same thing.
Oh gosh.
Yeah,
okay.
the big long tents.
Somebody took that picture. Do you remember who it was?
Yes, me.
So you weren't doing.
Well, I wanted to take the picture and then go help them. So, but at one point, the whole thing was completely down on the ground.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm guessing there was quite a bit of a mess to clean up.
It was, yeah, and inside too.
Yeah.
But luckily, we had them to help us, the Koreans. So.
Right. We also have a picture of one of the houseboys that you worked with. No, that's the soldiers. Okay, that's
that would be that. There is just a couple of the soldiers that were with us.
right.
Yep.
Okay, and I think I see some mountains in the background.
Right. Yeah. That was just before the 38th parallel.
Right.
It was just behind that.
Okay, and I'm also noticing one of the soldiers is black. Were there a number of black soldiers, or
in our little unit we had there was maybe three or four, yeah,
okay.
at different times, because some of them guys kind of come and go. If they got rotated to go home, then you would get somebody else take their place.
Sure.
And,
Could you talk to us a little bit about race relations that you observed, both in the service and
well,
like when you were?
As far as I could tell, there was no problems at all, because, well, even in basic training, a lot of the ones that were with us were from down south, and a lot of them were colored that came from down south, because there wasn't that many infantry training camps on the East Coast, so they came all the way up to where we were in Pennsylvania. And you lived in the same barracks and just, worked with them and trained with them. And the same thing overseas, the ones that were with you overseas, they would, just like yourself. And plus it was the United Nations, so it wasn't just, just different, the only different ones weren't just black. I mean, they could have been Turkish troops or Australian or anything.
Talk to us a little bit about the United Nations troops, because that's not something that we talked about before. How did you? Where were they serving? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, they had all different units too. I mean, some of them were artillery, and there was one unit that we dealt with that were all medical, and they were Australians. But they did the same thing we did. They were just in a different area than we were in. And they're just as friendly as could be. I mean, you just mixed in with them, no matter what nationality they were or anything. So.
How did you handle language issues? You talked about Turkish troops and...
some of them were a little tougher, but almost everybody would speak English anyways by the time they got over there. So maybe that's why they sent certain groups there. I don't know, but there was never any problem as far as the language went.
Did you have any curiosity about where they were from? Did you ever talk to them about home? Or?
Yeah, we kind of mixed in because a lot of times you would be eating with them too, you know, and you know, just how it was in their parts of the country, because it's not like they were all from the United States, you know, they were from different countries actually. So
yeah, I'm guessing that might have been a. Were you prepared for that? Was that a surprise to you to meet so many people from different countries?
it was, because even though I knew it was a United Nations, as they would call it, a police action, they didn't call it a war. But even though I knew it was that, and it was going to be all different countries, you don't realize that till you actually get over there, and they're right there with you. It's not like they were in another part of the country and you never dealt with them, you know. We always had interaction with them.
Can you explain to us why it was called a police action rather than a war?
I honestly don't know. I mean, they were getting wounded and killed just as easy as a Second World War, but you know, or the Vietnam War, same thing. But they never declared it as a war. I have no idea.
Okay, so it was a political thing more than.
Yeah, that would be my guess. Yes.
Okay, all right. Now, you talked about being a medic, and we have a picture of, I think, one of your colleagues in front of your sign in your tent that said the medic sign. Do we have a picture of that? We might not, but can you tell us a little bit of your duties being a medic?
My duties, at least for the first 4 or 5 months that I were over there while the war was on, was basically working with the patients that were in the tents, or loading them and unloading them, and sometimes they came in on trucks instead of ambulances.
Okay, there's the sign in front of, there's your.
Yes, that would have been on after when the war was declared over, not war, but the police action was declared over. We went down to Seoul Air Base in Seoul, right in the city, and that's where that one was taken.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right, but that was your medical company.
Right. Yes,
okay.
that was where we were the only Army unit that was on the airfield. Everybody else was Air Force.
Okay. All right. Tell us a little bit more about your duties. Excuse me.
Well, like I say, the first 4 months, that was it, actually dealing with the patients. And then when somebody was rotating going home that was working in the mess tent, they asked if anybody wanted to go there and try and help out in the kitchen. So I figured that was one of the easier jobs. You didn't have to lift anybody. So I volunteered, and they ended up making me learn everything, not everything, but a lot of stuff about cooking. So that was a lot easier than what I was doing, and less messy too. So.
Does this mean you no longer served as a medic? You served in the kitchen?
Right, then I didn't have to go down there. Unless they were short-handed, I still would have went down there. But at that point, there was less and less patients coming in.
Okay.
You know, by the time I went to do the duty in the kitchen there. So.
The war was winding down?
Yes,
okay.
it was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now you described your brother who drove the trucks.
Right.
But and that he was going up to the front lines. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of those experiences of your brother coming by, and also about when people were coming from the front lines and your concerns about him?
Well, where we were was right along the railroad tracks, and that's where all the supplies would come in, right to where we were. And my brother used to come, because he was in the artillery and he drove an ammunition truck, and he would come to load up to take it all back to his unit. And he found out the name of the place where I was stationed by writing home, and then he came walking up the hill one day, and I couldn't believe it was him because I didn't know he was coming. And he come walking up the hill to where we were, because we were just at the top of the hill where the train used to come in. And it was such a surprise. So he came to my place 2 or 3 times and stayed over, and I went to where he was 2 or 3 times and stayed where he was. And
But you knew that he was going up to the front lines.
yes, yes. In fact, a lot of them that were coming in at one point was when his unit was getting overrun, and part of his unit was coming through us as the wounded. And he never got wounded, but it was his unit, and they had to actually, pull out from where they were.
You must have checked the wounded pretty closely.
Yeah, and there was one or two different, well, at least 2 people that knew him, because they were the guys that were right in the same unit.
Yeah.
And they had said that he had pulled out and with the truck, because they had to get some of the weapons out that they had, and the ones that they couldn't hook up and get out in time, they just blew them up so nobody else could use them. So.
Yeah, it must have made it feel even closer to home.
Yeah, yeah, and you don't know, because I didn't hear from him again after that. He didn't, because he was in a whole different area after that, so I never heard from him. There was no cell phones in them days to call back and forth, so.
Right, a lot of worry.
Right.
Yeah.
I just had to wait till, I heard from home.
And this brother's name is?
That was Donald, my brother Donald.
Donald.
Yeah, he was in for 7 years.
Okay.
And the other brother, the third brother, was in for 22 years.
A career.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. Now, you saw a lot of poverty when you were in Korea, and you actually took a picture of how some people live that I think we have. Okay, that's your brother again.
Right.
That was the brother that survived.
That would be one of the villages. That one happened to be right outside of the airfield, probably 100 yards from the air base where we were stationed down in Seoul. And they made those buildings with whatever they could find, cardboard or scrap tin or anything from a dump or anywhere, and they had no heat. The only way they heated their little huts that they got there was they had fires underneath the floor. The floors were like a foot, 2 feet high, and they would put hot coals or something underneath the floor.
Wooden floors? Or?
Yeah, they were just wooden or straw almost, the one that they didn't burn down, but that's how they could heat them. They didn't have heaters to speak of. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, you wrote an interesting sign on the back of that picture, an interesting note to your family. Could you tell us a little bit about how that made you feel when you saw that and sent a note home to your parents?
Like I say, you see how those people were living. Of course, on the air base, we had all the food we wanted and, hot showers and everything, and you see how those people were living, and a lot of people back home didn't realize what you had to go through, because they didn't have a whole lot of film about the wars that you would see how they were living. They would show maybe the battle or something like that, but they didn't really show how the people that were living, that lived in the country.
The Korean people.
The Koreans themselves, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like it gave you some perspective.
Yeah, you're a lot better off than a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. You also mentioned about the weather and keeping warm. Tell us a little bit about what the weather was like while you were there.
Well, in the winters it was bitter cold, and the only thing they had in those tents to heat was these pot-bellied stoves that run on the fuel that you use for the trucks. And those things would get so red hot, they had to stand away from them because you get all burnt in front of you just standing near it. So basically there was no heat, because you'd have one of those on one end of the tent and one at the other end, and you're only warm when you went to bed and covered up, not during the day.
Okay.
That was the winter time there. So.
Did you worry about burning the tents down?
No, not really.
Okay.
No.
So I guess those mountains, we think about Asia as being tropical, but you were not in the tropics.
No, but it did get hot in the summertime, the summer months that we were there. It got pretty hot. But any time from September on. It was got cold, and especially in the winter time itself. So.
Okay, so it was fairly northern.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, when you were in Korea for 16 months, and when you were returned from Korea, were you still in the service? Did you get discharged
Yeah.
right then? Were you in for 4 years? How did that
I
work?
had a little over a year to go because I went in for 3 years. I had a little more than a year to go. And I ended up being down in Fort Monroe, Virginia, which was the 1st Army headquarters. Mostly all officers down there.
Hmm. And you were enlisted?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I worked in the officers' buildings there, cooking in the officers' buildings. Yeah.
Mhm. You said something to me earlier about when you sent mail home, that you had letters before your name or after your name that you did, there was something that designated whether you were enlisted or
Right.
drafted.
If
Could you tell us just a little bit about
if it was
that?
RA before your serial number, it meant you enlisted. If you were US before it, it meant you were drafted. So a lot of times you didn't want somebody to know you enlisted, so you would just put the US before it, and you would still get your mail anyway. So, but because you would get a lot of ribbing if they knew you joined,
Why would they make fun of you for having joined?
because they thought a lot of them thought you were crazy to go in, and they were drafted. So you just kind of avoided the situation. So
That feels very different from the sentiments of World War II.
well, World War II, I think, yeah, it was a different type of war. So
Okay.
yeah.
So to enlist for this war action, whatever they called it, there was a different feeling in the country amongst the people who were in the war.
I think it was just the individuals that just, if they wanted to give you a hard time, they would use that as a reason to give you a hard time, because they knew you were going to be in longer than them. Most of them I went in with were draftees.
And they were in for how long?
They were only in for 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you worked for an extra year.
Right, I had another year to go
Okay.
when I came home.
Okay. Now, when you had that 3rd year, did you have an option to make a career?
I did, but I thought 3 was enough for myself. So
Okay. And so you made the choice to be discharged?
right, from Virginia. Yeah.
Okay. What did you do once you were discharged?
I ended up getting a couple of different jobs, driving a truck, 2 or 3 different places.
Back here in
Yeah.
Massachusetts?
Yes, in Massachusetts,
Okay.
one in Walpole and one in Canton.
But
And
you moved back home to Franklin?
I lived in Franklin, yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay. Now you have a number of children and a wife. How did that? How did you meet your wife, and how soon after you were in service did you get married?
I met my wife through a friend who was also going with this one girl who knew my wife, and so it was kind of fixed up with her then at that point.
Hmm. So you were in your early 20s?
Probably 23.
Okay.
I got out when I was 20. I met her at 23.
Hmm. Okay. And what did you end up doing basically as career work?
I ran a warehouse for 30 years,
Okay.
clothing warehouse.
Oh, right. Okay. All right. And you have how many children?
6.
6. Okay. So you've raised 6 good kids.
Yeah,
And you're still working for one of them.
I'm still working, yes. I work for my sons.
You do. And what kind of work do they have?
I work where they do the state inspections for vehicles. I work, it's all family. Work my 2 sons and my daughter and daughter-in-law.
Hmm.
I just try and take 1 day a week off
Or a little time to come into a television
to
studio.
do this, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you would like to tell us about that I didn't remember to ask you?
I don't know, nothing special. Just seems we covered pretty much everything, I think.
Any regrets about being
Not
in
at
the
all.
service?
No, I never regretted going in for the 3 years. And it was a good time in my life, so.
Mm-hmm. And you chose not to make use of a GI Bill, or?
Did I? No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, that wasn't it. Okay.
No.
What do you think that most positive would you have said that you got out of the service?
Well, that you got to do what you're told when somebody tells you to do something when you go get a job. You won't have a job very long. When you're in the service, they tell you to do something, you do it.
Mm-hmm. And that's carried on for the rest of your life.
Right, I think so.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. All right. Well, we've been speaking with Robert Weidman of Franklin, Massachusetts. Thank you very much for joining us.
I'm glad to do it.
And thanks to ABMI for their support of this Veterans Oral History Project. This program is also supported in part by a grant from the Bellingham Cultural Council, a local agency which is supported by the Massachusetts Cultural Council, a state agency. We will be sending copies of all these interviews to the Library of Congress to become part of the permanent record there. And any veteran who has ties to Bellingham or Mendon is encouraged to contact us to arrange to be interviewed here at ABMI Cable 8. Please call Cable 8 at 508-966-3234 or email me, Marjorie Turner Holman, marjorie@marjorieturner.com. The phone number for the station and my email will be in the credits at the end of the program. Each person's story is unique. We'd love to hear them all. Thank you again.
You're welcome.